All right, you're hearing my voice. Another SEC head coach bites the dust. Hugh Freeze fired. We found that out about an hour and 20 minutes of recording. Yes, we recorded later. We've been learning our lesson. If you're wondering why we aren't talking about that throughout the episode, or if you're seeing me looking down at my phone, that's because we were waiting on that news. But we did actually get that as we were recording. So if you want to just listen to the Hugh Freeze discussion, we get to that at the very end of the pod. We saved for the end. So just wanted to make sure that people know that this happened in real time. Credit to us. We've done this 2 times now where we've actually nailed the timing of recording. So good on us. Here is the rest of the week 10 recap pod. Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, I don't have nice things to say about YouTube TV or Disney right now. Does anybody besides ESPN, ABC personalities and telling us that we need to click on something and that it's up to us to change something that shouldn't need changing? Does anybody have any nice things to say about YouTube TV or Disney right now?
Yeah, I mean, in the face of, people from other conferences saying, oh, it's all rigged. Game day is always going to the SEC. ESPN favors the SEC. Having the very North Korea like line from almost every media personality just being like, I woke up this morning and it was on top of my mind was cable fairness. And I just feel like these people need to have their channels. It was like, felt like a little bit Black Mirror-ish in a way.
It sucked. It sucked. And as a YouTube TV subscriber who was scrambling at 11:30, ended up doing the Fubo thing, and then people are like, "Oh, you should do Fubo because Disney owns them too." Whatever. Sucked. Like how this keeps happening in this day and age when we pay so much money for this is insane to me. And for those that took it as an opportunity to just touch grass and not watch college football, I can't say I blame you because it's exhausting. And it's so exhausting to see all the different ways that people try and squeeze every last dollar out of the freaking college football fan. And it's just like, well, this is what you got to do. No, we're out here flying Kirk Herbstreit on his own freaking private jet to spend an hour in Eugene, Oregon and pretend like it actually matters. We got to spend that money. And we're going to sit here and tell you that you need to click on a link to be able to watch college football on a given Saturday. Miss me with that a million times over. Oh, and then to have Herbstreit tweet that out and then, oh yeah, keep my networks. Suck brick, kid.
There's a brief moment, from probably about 2008 to I'm going to say about 2012 or 13, where it felt like the internet was this beautiful thing that was created to help all of us. And it felt like that was when, Reddit and like kind of like some of the answers
E-Bombs
online.
world. Yeah.
You said what?
E-Bombs world.
E-Bombs world. Thank you. Yes, like that was my perception of the internet. And then what happened was over the course of it, I think it certainly accelerated during and post-COVID, the internet became a place and streaming became a place where it was just super capitalism. So I remember a time in college where I remember when I first got Netflix, dude, in college, it had like every cartoon show, it had every classic show. It was super cheap. It was like $6 a month. Me and my boys were able to watch it. It was like, oh my God, the magic TV box. Now you look back and there are people just pining for cable because it works and it's easy.
We did deal with this issue with cable, and it was what forced me to switch to Spectrum TV from Spectrum TV to YouTube TV. I don't care blasting them; they are awful. But it was blacking out the Florida Utah game to start the 2023 season and doing it as kickoff was happening, and then being like, "Oh well, you got to fight to keep your channels." No. In the words of the great Don Draper, that's what the money's for. Okay. I pay $85 a month for this. Figure it out. Figure it out. And if you're a college football fan that feels really jaded right now, you're coming to a place with free content with people that were in the same position as you were, although in a slightly different way. Like I tweeted out, hey, what's the move for today? What are we doing? And then there were a lot of people like, just don't watch football. And I was like, yeah, well, I can't really have that option. Kind of my job.
And I've been sentenced to watch Kentucky Auburn, whether I like it or not. Okay, so I'm gonna have to carry out that sentence,
Yes.
win one way or another.
Yeah, and the multi-view not being able to have that was a little bit frustrating, but we made it through. And you know what? We have a full slate to be able to discuss today, and we're not just going to black you out at the last second and say, hey, it's up to you to fix this. Give us a 5-star review and show us that you want to keep us, blah, blah. Oh my God, I hated that. Anyway, before we get to everything that happened in week 10, a week 10 in which we had 6 SEC games and 5 decided by 1 score or less. Before we get to everything, a quick word from our friends at Dabble. If you're listening to this, maybe it's Sunday afternoon, maybe it's Monday or whatever it is, and you are just trying to come off the high of a college football weekend that started with some awkwardness or whatever it might be, and you're looking to do some daily fantasy, Dabble is the place to do it. It's one of the newest and best apps in the daily fantasy space. They've wasted no time making a name for themselves. The social function is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports making picks, including college football, NFL. We've got NBA that just started up. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Will, let's start with, in my opinion, the most surprising game of Saturday. And that was Tennessee hosting Oklahoma and Brent Venables getting a Toby Keith win. Big time Toby Keith win. How do you like me now? He avenges last year's loss in a playoff elimination game. First true road win versus an AP top 25 team that he has ever had in his career. To be fair, he only had one other opportunity last year, Ole Miss. That wasn't going to be the team to get it done. But Oklahoma hadn't done that since 2019. You know, like think of the great wins that Oklahoma has been has been responsible for in the 21st century. That's a long time to go without that type of a victory. And Will, maybe you'll disagree with this, but I think this win, we talked about in the preview, I think this was bigger than 2023 Texas. I think it's bigger than last year beating Bama when your team is already eliminated. You already know the offense is going to be overhauled. I think it was bigger than those two games for Venables just because of the timing of it. Is that a fair take, or is that too heat of the moment reactionary?
I agree, and we've kind of talked about the different tiers of SEC teams, and this was a game that early felt like Tennessee was in kind of a tier above Oklahoma with the way that their
Yes.
offense was humming and stuff like that. And so for Venables to be able to kind of take that punch in the mouth, to look across the table and say, we're not scared of you guys. And in fact, we are the tougher team. We are the team that's going to go to your house and, night mode and punch you in the mouth. And we're going to have our Mason Thomas, Greg Jennings touchdown.
Dude.
We're going to have all kinds of stuff. Like, no matter what you throw at us, we are just going to keep throwing rocks back at you and we're going to keep getting up. And I think that's when they hired Brent Venables, to your point, exactly what they hoped for.
And if you had lost this game, it would have been losses in 3 of 4, including a couple of very notable ones being Texas and Oklahoma, with Ole Miss in there as well. And you would have been out of playoff contention with an ineffective offense. And suddenly you've got people asking the question, how different is this year compared to last? And that was the scenario that Brent Venables, whether he wanted to say it publicly, had to avoid. And this game was weird. It was weird. It was spooky. It was just plain dumb at certain points, especially with the late game decisions that were being made. But in that atmosphere, all that mattered for Brent Venables was getting out of it with a win and showing whoever his new boss is, I can win this type of game. That matters. It really does. Like, these are the types of games where if you are trying to be the long-term guy, you can't just look that good at home. You can't. I just think that wins like this on the road go double in that atmosphere. You keep your playoff hopes alive for another couple weeks. And it's not even like a playoff or bust situation for Oklahoma this year. You're going to go into the middle of November still with playoff life, that was the goal. And with a very difficult schedule, that's no small feat. You show in this game that you were not in Josh Heupel's shadow. Because if that guy goes 2-0 against you, everybody's going, man, he's at the top of our list when you get replaced. He just is. And maybe that'll still be the case. Okay. Maybe things will fall apart and this won't be a long lasting win. But man, it would have been tough, really tough for Brent Venables if Josh Heupel had been the guy that had his number. And instead, it was the Venables defense that ultimately was the strongest force against a very lost Joey Aguilar.
Yeah, and two, we talked about going into this game. What is the new standard for Oklahoma within the SEC, right? Are we going to say, oh, the SEC is just so much better than the Big 12? So all these marquee wins that you used to have, you'd have a couple weeks in between to prepare. You'd have your building. You'd have all this. You had a ticket punch to the Big 12 championship. So what Brent Venables has done has been acceptable in the SEC. Well, after last week, when you do kind of, I'm not going to say get embarrassed against Ole Miss at home, but you prove that these home victories, which are often what coaches are able to hang their hats on when things go sideways, you weren't able to get one of those. Well, now this is a vintage 1980s style SEC win, right? You go into a rockin' Neyland Stadium, maybe the light show's new, right? But the rest of it, the vitriol, the crowd, the style of football game really proved that Oklahoma under Venables, I would say, probably more than ever belongs in the SEC and can punch back and can hang in these big time games.
Joey Aguilar. Let's have the conversation, Will. He turned into a pumpkin, came back down to earth. I'm not sure if it's the neck injury. There were a couple of moments in this game where they showed him, and it looked like he was still trying to work through that. Kind of the same way, and we'll talk about it with Arch Manning. Kind of had some moments like that as well. But he's just making some bad decisions. If it's the neck that is preventing him from being able to think clearly, much like we talked about with Mateer, and some of his decision making could be impacted by the thumb injury.
Real
I
quick,
don't
did you
know.
see that 8K, 4K slow mo of him high fiving the fan
Oh,
pregame?
I didn't see that. No.
It was like a Holly Rowe report where they were like, "Well, you tell me, do we see a wince here?" And he's like, "There's a fan that's like, oh my gosh, Mateer, I love you," and he high fives him, and he kind of goes, "Ugh," and it's like, "Uh-oh, Mateer's looking hurt," like pregame, and so to finish that or to follow that with 80 yards rushing and Joey Aguilar being the one who looked out of sorts at home, pretty crazy.
And you wouldn't have known it based on the vast majority of the first half. This was the type of first half where if you weren't able to have the multi-view situation or something like that, and you were just kind of, watching this, but not necessarily exclusively, and you're going to be flipping back to another channel or wherever it was, you would say, well, Tennessee's dominating this game, but it was just a few of those just inexplicable turnovers that you cannot have that doom Tennessee, at least early on. Joey Aguilar didn't see the blindside pressure, and then R. Mason Thomas gets the scoop and score where he put the whole team on his back, full Greg Jennings. The fact that SC Network even wasn't on the joke, you just kind of knew, limping at the very end of it. Hope R. Mason Thomas is all right. They were basically without him, I think, the rest of the game from that point on. But the two others, he just threw them up for grabs, man. That was like a Rex Grossman 2005 throw.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
the pain I hear.
just off the back foot. Don't care if there's an over the top safety. It's basically an arm punt to him. 3 first half turnovers that Tennessee had, that Aguilar had, led to Oklahoma leading 16-10 at halftime. A game in which Tennessee moved the ball so much better than Oklahoma. And it looks like the same banged up John Mateer, the same limited Oklahoma offense. And you're kind of wondering, man, are they kind of playing with some fire here? The defense is about to get gashed. And it's ironic considering that the big knock against the Oklahoma defense is that it couldn't get takeaways. It had 4 coming into this game, and they got 3 in the first half. It was that kind of weak in the SEC, but that was just kind of part of the weirdness. I thought Aguilar's touchdown pass to Braylon Staley was double coverage, and maybe some friendly fire on the back end for Oklahoma kind of paved the way for 6, but it could have been even worse. I thought that play, it could have been picked. And in that moment, I started to feel like, oh, Tennessee's going to be fine. It would be one of those strange first halves that they just kind of shake off, and Oklahoma is ultimately not able to go into that atmosphere and win because they just can't move the ball. They can't sustain scoring drives. But you said it, man. John Mateer getting back to the pre-injury version of himself, at least as a runner. Maybe not so much as a passer, but the decisions were so much better in the second half. He didn't look like he had the happy feet. He had so many moments in the first half, and Herbstreit called it out too, where like, why are you leaving your feet? Like leaving your feet to make these throws. You're not setting your feet the way that you need to. Like, you're not a big guy. You can't get away with that, especially not at this level. And in the second half, he just looked like a different player. And it's kind of it's painfully obvious. Oklahoma's offense, we can talk about all the non-Mateer rushing options. They need the Mateer rushing option to be an option, because without it, man, I just don't know. I don't know what they're doing with Torrey Blaylock, if he got hurt or whatever, but he was invisible. He had 1 carry in this game, and everybody's kind of like, why is that guy on the sideline? Xavier Robinson ends up having a fumble, has a big touchdown as well. But Will, I was surprised that Oklahoma's offense came out and had the response that they did when it looked like nothing was really going to go their way, and they were going to be dependent on the defense forcing turnovers all game to be able to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's exactly what you just hit on, right? Where Tennessee comes in, they're this high flying offense. They're getting the typical, Chris Brazil catch where you're going, oh my gosh, this
Brazzle,
guy's
yeah.
an Brazil, sorry. Where it's like, oh, this guy's an alien. But then down the stretch, they were able to lean on that run game, and it wasn't perfect. I mean, this is a game where the football hit the ground 6 different times, right? And most of it was team recover, like they would get the
Wow.
ball back. But this is a game where it was a knockdown, drag out fight. And you don't want to get into that with a Brent Venables team. No one has ever wanted to get into that with a Brent Venables team. And the thing that's crazy is I would argue that this Tennessee team is shown to be a little bit better than last year to this point. But last year's Tennessee team would have been great in this game. They would have been able to run the ball, I feel. Even with Nico, they would have taken that away and probably not turned the ball over as much, right?
They couldn't run the ball. They
Yeah.
could not run the ball. They couldn't get anything going against that Oklahoma front, and it proved costly. You're right. They didn't really feel like they could just break off those 6-7 yard gains and stay on schedule, and that's something that Tennessee is really not used to. I thought it was definitely a difference in this game, and Oklahoma is able to kind of make those plays down the stretch. Will while we do need to praise Oklahoma, my God, the John Mateer interception that was thrown. So bad. If you didn't see this play, Oklahoma's up 9 with 4 minutes left, driving in Tennessee territory. You'd think, run the football. At the very least, even if you don't get a field goal here, you're up 2 scores. Figure it out. I have no idea what they were thinking on that play, or if that was a Mateer decision, if it was an Arbuckle decision, but nonetheless, the arm angle that John Mateer makes this throw was like Arch Manning, what we've criticized with him, and he throws a 95-mile-an-hour fastball on the outside part of the plate and misses his spot. You just can't do that in that area of the field in that situation. And it was the play that Tennessee picks off, and all of a sudden the Vols had life late. They had life in too many moments down the stretch in which they did not deserve to have life. It was some bad clock management by Oklahoma. But maybe the other difference, and we probably buried the lead by not talking about him just yet, short shorts wearing Tate Sandell, man. Wow.
You know what? That is because right there, if that dude's not a superhuman on this night, we're just like, well, Oklahoma can't get it because it changed everything. His ability to hit these long field goals confidently completely changed this game.
He hit 3 from 50 plus in a game. Guys don't do that in a year at the college level. And it was Barry Trammell, friend of the program. Shout out, Barry. I hope you're still listening. Said best kicking performance in Oklahoma history. Yeah. You can't really do much better than that. You got Herb Street up there making fun of his shorts and stuff like that, saying it should be illegal. And he just goes out there left footed and hits bombs. And then I kind of like too that he's a little bit more subtle. Some of his kickers get a little bit too hype and he's kind of just doing, the mean mugging thing. We need more of that in kicking. Bring that back.
You gotta let your pants do the talking, and on a weekend that ESPN was kind of the villains, right? So it's so fitting to have the voice of like Herb Street be like, "Oh, this kid, he doesn't know what he's doing out there." And when you sign on to Oklahoma to be a kicker, what do you sign up for? Kicking a lot of PATs usually, right? Being the leading scorer in Big 12 history, being able to sit there and say, "Oh, okay, we didn't finish this drive in the red zone." No, this dude is a specialist. He is earning that scholarship.
Bombs. Just absolute bombs. I think he came from UTSA, I want to say. And that's what everybody should be doing. If you're not getting a kicker from the portal, I think you're probably doing it wrong. And kicking a field goal at the SEC level, same as kicking it at Conference USA or AAC. Like, get these guys from all over. It doesn't matter. But yeah, huge. Oklahoma needed every bit of it. I need to get this off my chest. This is a little bit of a side tangent here. I don't know if you've noticed this too in football. And this isn't so much an Oklahoma thing. This is a big picture thing that we're seeing over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. Xavier Robinson didn't go into the end zone up 2 with 1:44 to play. Could have made it a 2-score game. They opt to do the very next play. Mateer runs it in for a touchdown. I think we're going too far with this. Just run it into the end zone, man. Score the points. Score the 7 points. Now, I understand if it's a 1-point game and then it's going to still make it a 1-possession game, different. You're going to make it a 2-possession game. Score the touchdown. Score the touchdown and stop making the play that you think your coach is going to pat you on the back for in the film room. Okay? And stop doing the thing that you think people are going to say, "Oh, that's really unselfish. Wow, look at that. We're going to show this on all across college football. This is a real teammate." And I'm sure Georgia fans, or maybe anybody who bet Georgia -7.5 or -7 and bet on the over in that game, would probably also agree, Gunnar Stockton, you didn't have to do that too. I don't always think it's a smart play. I really don't. And I don't understand why it's so universal that guys are like looking around like, "Oh, I better just stop there." No, score the touchdown. Score the touchdown. I promise I won't call you selfish if you waltz into the end zone and make it a 2-score game when you're up 2 points.
You're right though. It's kind of like a pick me thing, right?
It
It's like,
is.
look at me. I'm such a good sportsman. It's like
Ugh.
that commercial we always joke about where it's like, hey, I call the timeout or whatever. The ball's off me. It's like, no, dude, because even if there was some giga brain, oh, you've never, put a hand in the dirt coaching logic here, they went ahead and got the touchdown the next play because
Yeah.
mathematically it didn't make any sense. And so at least for the Gunnar Stockton play, I can get, hey, you can just kneel the ball out and end the game here, and maybe you are being Mr. Sportsman. Even though within Kirby's heart of hearts, he hates Florida so much that he probably would have preferred you score more points against Florida.
Same with Florida, though, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And so point being, like, maybe that's a little bit different. But yeah, here it's like, hey, brother, what are you doing? Like, did they tell you to do like they didn't tell you to do this because they immediately had to call a play and score, you know?
Yeah, run time off the clock. I'm not saying you got to go full Deshaun Jackson, run down the goal line and try and waste more time, but we're going too far with this stuff. Just score the touchdown. Just score the touchdown and make it a 2-score game. Anyway, great win for Oklahoma. Great win for Oklahoma. Still would guess that the playoff path ends at Alabama in a couple weeks, but you never know. You dominated that team last year. You ran the football all over them with a very inept, historically bad Oklahoma offense. Never say never. And then if you're able to somehow pull off a miracle and win that game, you've got 2 more at home. So you know what? This is not a bad place to be sitting in if you're Brent Venables. This is ideally the conversations that we were having about your team going into November and talking about whether or not this group has taken that next step. I think we can definitively say that Oklahoma, it wasn't just a byproduct of a favorable start to their schedule. They are a team that is at least solid, and maybe it's not playoff solid, but it's solid and it's showing that they can do some things with the right pieces in place.
You know what's crazy too? I mean, the funniest outcome for sure, right, would be that Oklahoma goes out to Bryant Denny Stadium, beats Alabama, and then finds a way to lose against Mizzou. Like that would be absolute cinema. But that being said, they did show the blueprint of a team on Saturday that could play well against Alabama because they were able to control the football to a degree, right? Someone that's picking up your own fumbles. They were able to run the ball. They had a couple of different running options. They didn't really turn the ball over. And on the other end, they forced turnovers, right? So this was a very Oklahoma became the team that we hoped Vanderbilt would be. And that's a team that's given Alabama some problems. So I'm not ready to call them dead just yet. But to your point, you technically got 2 ranked teams. Let's just let it play out. But if you're Brent Venables, to look up in kind of the early middle part of November and be like, hey, we're still contending, I think is a massive upgrade from last year. And as long as you don't go 0-2 in these 2 games, you certainly have something to build on going into the offseason.
And you see what it's like on the other sideline for Tennessee. Josh Heupel's first home loss to a non-Georgia team since Lane Kiffin came back and got hit by mustard bottles.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy? 2021. Yeah. They don't lose to non-Georgia teams at home. And you see that atmosphere. My best buddy Bronson, who goes to one Tennessee game a year, he was there last night, was just in awe of the atmosphere, understandably so. But man, it's one thing if you run into a buzzsaw. And I'm not trying to take credit away from Oklahoma. I think we gave Oklahoma plenty of credit there. But that's going to be a tough one to watch back for Tennessee, man. Like just really, really tough. The turnovers were so bad. We talked about that, not being able to run the football. The 4th down pass attempt that schemed open beautifully, but a freshman tight end kind of got a little bit caught up in the backfield and then just gets hit in the face with it when you're down 2 scores, and you can't have that in that spot. You just can't. And they had a perfect sideline shot showing Heupel, and he's just in disbelief. Like, what do we have to do, man? And at that point, it's not your night. But Tennessee could win a game in which it had the benefit of 11 Oklahoma penalties for 104 yards. All of those things that you would think, hey, this should be advantage Vols. And instead, you kind of look up after this game and you realize, oh boy, this is turning into a hollow 8-4 Tennessee season. And again, it doesn't mean that the sky is falling. It doesn't mean that Josh Heupel needs to be on the hot seat or anything like that. But given the conversations we were having about Tennessee coming off of the Georgia loss, wherein you're a made kick away from winning that game and all of a sudden having control of your own destiny in the SEC race, and you are now staring at 3 losses, which is a playoff eliminator when you consider the strength of schedule or lack thereof. Your losses are to Georgia, Bama, and Oklahoma. And you can still end the losing streak in the swamp, have a chance to play spoiler for Vandy in the regular season finale. But I don't know, maybe we'll disagree with this. Tennessee seasons in which the highlight is playing spoiler for Vandy is not the mark of a great Tennessee football season.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of hit on that Josh Heupel has turned into a floor coach for Tennessee. Because at the end of the day, guys, I don't want to place too much blame on Joey Aguilar here because it does feel like the things around him kind of failed him where it comes to some of the O-line stuff, the run game for sure, right?
Yeah, he was pretty rough in this
He
game.
was he was bad,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that this to me is not the game of, oh, this is what happens when you get this quarterback from wherever the hell state and he's the lights are too bright. I think this was an unfortunate game in what was supposed to be a pretty bad season for Tennessee. Like we said in the preseason, we're looking at 4 or 5 losses for this team. Now we've seen this offense at times look like, one of the better offenses in the SEC, ranked as the best offense in the country for a long time this year. So again, that can kind of start to play tricks on you the same way that I talked about Texas A&M did last year, where I'm like, this isn't exactly a contender team. I see enough holes in this, right? But I can appreciate what they've done. That's kind of where I'm at with Tennessee, where it's like, hey, you have weird stuff happen. You have the 98-yard pick six. You have the missed kick against Georgia. You have the tight end thing, which again, just hard to assign blame there because the kid was open. Should we blame Josh Heupel for throwing to that kid? Probably not. I think that he was open, and at some level, you're a D1 SEC football player, but I don't want to blame the kid because he's just a kid. So he's a freshman. So that being said, they had enough opportunities. I'm right there with you, but I think this just kind of goes to show that we still need to see that next gear to call Josh Heupel a championship coach. Because as long as you're going to have losses like this, as long as you're going to be about a game out of the SEC championship and of contention, again, where you came from was terrible, and it was a dark age of Tennessee football. But you're not exactly at a place where you're contending every year the way that your rivals in Alabama and Georgia are.
Yeah, and I really don't want to sound dismissive because winning games matters. We've talked about the margin for error in the SEC this year. It's very limited, and there are so many worse places to be than 6-3. But 4 power conference wins that Tennessee has this year. Those teams are a combined 3-19 in conference play, and none of them have multiple conference wins. And the 3 teams that they lost to are 13-3 in conference play, 21-4 overall. That's what I mean when I say hollow. Because Syracuse could have been a better team had Steve Angeli not gotten hurt. The quarterback situation has been just a total disaster since that happened. But the reality is, you're looking at a season in which you could lack a marquee win, a hey, we've changed the minds of people everywhere type of win. Because even if you go into the swamp and beat Florida, you're going to be beating an interim coach. Some Florida fans will have an asterisk over that, even though the streak is the streak. And that's just a really tough place to be, especially when the team that is in your own state that said they were going to run your state is still alive for the college football playoff. We'll see how much longer. But yeah, that was probably one of the lower moments of the Heupel era. It had to be. And it's not to say that all is lost or anything like that, but a season that made you feel like, we've got kind of something working here. They were ultimately going to be a few pieces away. And I think that it's still a really good coaching job, but this was probably a flawed team and not one built for the college football playoff.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit with Lane Kiffin, where he has been able to elevate kind of an underwhelming roster against these big teams. And that's something that Tennessee has not been able to do, And, when you play better, we're going to hold you to a better standard. And so that being said, now the conversation becomes, okay, maybe you are kind of wasting this receiver core, right? Whereas, yeah, your plan at quarterback didn't go according to plan, but you certainly upgraded from last year, right? And so, yeah, okay, every year you're not going to have this weird transfer situation. Every year we're not guaranteed that you're going to have a receiver group like this, right? You're not going to have some of the things that they've had. Now, again, the corners on defense and the defense as a whole has kind of been putrid. I don't think we can say that that's like fire the coordinator level because we've seen so much out of them on that side of the ball over the last
Yeah,
several years.
Tim Banks deserves a little bit of grace, but it's been a massive disappointment with the injuries.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. It was a team that was the exact opposite of what we thought, right? We thought it'd be a gritty, physical team on offense that would kind of just stay in the game, and a defense, as we've seen, that would keep them in games the way that Oklahoma's has. Where in reality, the defense has been such a liability that it's caused their offense to have to do more, and their offense has been capable. But if you have that many reps and that many attempts and that many carries that you need to get to go equal the competition, it's going to be rough, especially with that quarterback situation. So I think this is just not a contending team, but a fun one, and one that hopefully they can reload and not lose some of the good elements while bringing back that physicality next year.
Oklahoma's done a better job overcoming their defensive injuries. Cortland Guillory playing as a true freshman, kind of doing the things that Eli Bowen did as a true freshman last year. Peyton Bowen having a whale of a season, man. Peyton Bowen is kind of living up to the 5-star billing that he came into with. And I'm really, really impressed with what they've been able to do. So, yeah, OU marches on, keeps playoff hopes alive. Okay, another huge game for college football playoff implications. Vandy and Texas. Very few things about this game made sense. Very few, Will. The final score, which read Texas 34, Vandy 31, even made less sense for those who were able to watch this game. The most complete game that Texas has played against power conference competition all year, like easily. Finally, a fast offensive start for Texas and a slow defensive start for Vandy. That totally flipped what we had talked about in the preview pod and what we had seen from them against power conference competition. Texas finally didn't look like the most casual team in college football. Texas fans were chanting overrated at Vandy, which is like, come on. You can't be the preseason #1 team in America and chant that at Vandy. What are we doing here? Yeah.
We're all the hero in our own story, right?
Yeah, whatever. Texas fans are just happy they got a home power conference game for the first time this season. Weird schedule. So weird. Somewhere, though, and maybe it's not just limited to Texas and Vandy fans. Somewhere, college football fans turn this game off at 4:13 in the fourth quarter. Because at 4:13 in the fourth quarter, they were, probably thinking, well, this one's over. Texas just scored a touchdown to make it 41-16. How in the world did this game finish 34-31? At 4:13, it looks like Arch had thrown a TD pass to Emmett Mosley, the Stanford transfer, ruled a touchdown initially. Replay showed that he dropped it. And there was a very, very obvious missed pass interference on that play in which a handful of jersey for multiple seconds. And you're thinking, how in the world is this not called from an official that's sitting right there? So Sark loses his mind. It doesn't matter because you can't review that. So the touchdown gets wiped off the board. And then instead of being in position to make it a 41-16 game with 4:13 to play, Texas has to settle for a long field goal. That's missed. On the very next play, coverage bust in the Texas secondary. Eli Stowers' 67-yard touchdown catch. Vandy goes for 2, looks short in real time, still looks like Junior Sherrill didn't break the plane upon review. Officials somehow give him the 2-point conversion. I don't know how that happened. Do
Well,
you?
the best part about that is, guys, now you know it's not a conspiracy. Because if they were like some mastermind Wizard of Oz pulling the levers behind the scene for the
Vandy.
SEC, they wouldn't have helped Vandy here, okay?
Maybe Josh Snead, SEC shorts behind the scenes. Maybe. Could be. Wouldn't rule
In
it
a
out.
crowd in King garb, he's just like,
Yeah.
2 points on the board.
Yeah. Um, so even at that point, 34-24, Texas should still be set up just fine. But then a 4-play Texas drive only takes 49 seconds off the clock, and Vandy goes 89 yards in 2 minutes and 31 seconds to make it a 34-31 game. Onside kick attempt isn't recovered by anyone. But just squirts out of bounds.
Sat
Game
on the
ends.
turf for what felt like 10 American minutes. Like you're sitting there and you're like, please, someone get the ball. Someone, anyone. And it's just like, boop, out of bounds.
If Texas had lost that game, my God, the takes. Holy cow, the takes. Not sure who bet Texas minus 3.5 and had to watch that finish, but you had yourself a rough day, especially if you also made the Georgia bet as well and watched the way that ended. But for Texas, a win was all that mattered. Okay. And they've been in survival mode since the Florida game. Second top 10 win of the season for the Longhorns, who now go into Tuesday's playoff ranking, knowing that they're very likely coming in ahead of Vandy. And that's good because Vandy was 9th in the AP poll coming in. We'll see how that plays out. But for the majority of that game, 55 minutes, give or take a few plays, a few coverage busts that they had within those 55 minutes, you saw the best version of Texas. You did. At least one that didn't look like it was suffering without Michael Taff, who, again, was out with a thumb injury, TBD on when he's going to be able to return. But this was a no-nonsense defense that got after Pavia 6 times after he had only taken 7 sacks all year. Anthony Hill, he just continues to play with his hair on fire. I'm going to start calling him Anthony Downhill. I don't know how it took me 3 years to come up with that, but here we are. And McElroy brought this up a lot in the broadcast, and I'm interested if you saw this too. The Tim Beck offense for a long time was not working against Texas because Texas is just way too disciplined, They've played too much football to be fooled by the window dressing, the pre-snap stuff, all the motion that they're going to try and do. So it was that much more impressive, I thought, that Vandy still got some of those big throwing windows and was able to fight back and actually make this a down to the wire finish in which Texas needed to recover or at least push an onside kick out of bounds to be able to survive.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the game that I got the most wrong ever. You could look at like, oh, Tennessee played in Georgia a couple
Well,
years ago. What's
I
up?
listened back. I listened back to the score prediction that you had.
Mhm.
You did initially say 27-7. You said
Yeah, you know what?
27-7.
We got there somehow. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of game flow, right? We both anticipated Texas to not take Vandy, and again, fans are chanting overrated. Like, there's still the entitlement there, but like I had scheduled a haircut at 11 Eastern, thinking, a week ago, thinking, okay, I'll be able to do what I always do: walk in, at 11:45, turn my stuff on. Well, I didn't realize I had to sign up for a whole new world of cable. So by the time I was able to get this on 15 minutes into the game, I texted you. I was like, well, like, let me get an update. And it's like, yeah, Texas did exactly what Texas needs to do to just jump ahead in the game. They had the one play, 75-yard touchdown by Wingo. They had like a sack strip fumble against Pavia. And it's like, yeah, then a field goal. So they're up 10 early, get a defensive stop, another touchdown. So like they got shot out of a cannon. It was bad out of hell. Like, okay, we're at home. We're going to like push this Vandy team around. And I think, to your point, to go back to the McElroy question, so to defend Vandy, right, it appears, and I'm not a football savant or anything, but the answer is trust your guys and beat them in talent, right? Something we've talked about this with Georgia when they played Tennessee, where it's like, do not overthink this. Line up, play cat defense, and don't get fooled. And Texas, it felt like, was able to do that with some of these, not just 4 or 5 stars that they have, but dudes that are like playing above even their good recruiting ranking, where you can match a hat on two hats sometimes because you have these freaks, up front that Texas does. And so whenever you don't have to overcommit to the run, that I think is the difference between what Bama has done and what Texas did against Vandy, because Bama can get a little bit greedy for the big play, the TFL, the sack, whereas Texas is very much just like, come get it, push us forward for 4 yards. You're not going to be able to do that, weight room. And that's what the first kind of 3+ quarters of this game felt like. But then, okay, and I'll say this too, if you're Vandy, one thing that's worrying about this is we've kind of seen that when Vandy has needed to really truly lean on Pavia again against Alabama, it hasn't been great success. And so Texas was able to basically bank on, hey, Pavia is not going to beat us for 3 quarters. Then when they kind of continued that game plan, then when they kind of backed off, he was able to have some success. But I think that putting together 4 quarters of that actual like drop back passing out of Pavia makes this offense a lot more deadly, because to this point it's kind of hinged on getting the trickeration, getting the run plays, and then tricking you with a pass. Whereas when it succeeded, it was more of, hey, like, we're going to scheme guys open and actually beat you one-on-one and try to do that.
Texas's edges did such a great job of anticipating how he was going to want to operate behind the pocket. And there were a lot of moments in which you were reminded that this is a group that still has a lot of pride and still is very capable of adjusting to a guy like that. And there are people that will look at that, or if they just watch the first 55 minutes of this game, they said, Vandy's a fraud. See, this is why you just can't necessarily celebrate this team. And that take sucks. It just does. For the Vandy side, real quick, I've got a good news, bad news thing for you. The good news is that the playoff path still exists. Okay. You've got Auburn and Kentucky at home and then at Tennessee. Not a given, but certainly not impossible. You're certainly not looking at that 3-game stretch with the body of work that you've had so far and said, oh man, we're going to get at least one of those teams is going to get us. They've already beaten 3 teams that were ranked inside the top 15 at the time of the matchup. The obvious issue being that those games have not necessarily aged in the way that they hoped, with wins against South Carolina, LSU, and Mizzou. They're not going to probably be teams that at the end of the season you're looking up going, oh, wow, they're in the top 10 or something like that. I still believe that a 10-2 Vandy team who beats Tennessee in Knoxville, again, that's what we'd be talking about if they get to 10-2, that would be extremely difficult for the selection committee to keep out. And I'm not a big quality loss guy, but they did fight back against Texas. And that game, ironically enough, against Bama was probably the closer game overall than Texas was, even though the final scores will indicate something else. So you don't have necessarily these big grenade losses, at least not yet, on your resume. So I think Tuesday's initial ranking is going to be really interesting for Vandy. So that's the good news. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yes, and I agree, and I will say too, though, with Vandy, both of those teams, just hear me out. In Auburn and Kentucky, what we like about those teams can be a little bit of that talent up front or the toughness on defense. So don't be alarmed if one or both of these games end up being a little bit closer than you would expect, because that's not kind of where those teams have struggled in my mind, right? It's pass
Auburn's defensive
defense.
front, yeah, is
Yes.
legit, and they can do a lot of the things that Texas was doing.
Exactly. So it's like I'm glad that you're like on my side there and not like, oh, you shouldn't
Yep.
worry about these teams. It's like actually it's like Bama is not good at that. Like Auburn is. Now Bama's good at everything else, and so it doesn't matter. But like to that point, don't be shocked if these are rock fights that look kind of ugly for Vandy. But yeah, that test is at Tennessee, and based on what we've seen, I think they're still a better team, you know?
Yeah, I would say Vandy is the better team on a neutral site. It doesn't mean that you go into that building and win. Well, the bad news for Vandy, and this is going to sound a little bit reactionary, but I promise I have some context to it. I don't think Diego Pavia is winning the Heisman Trophy now. I think that's done.
Agreed.
And I think he could still make it to New York. Okay. If I'm guessing, winning the award as the best player in college football is going to be extremely tough now. It's a weird thing to say after a guy eclipses 400 yards of offense and 4 touchdowns on the road against the preseason number 1 team in college football. Like that's just not necessarily an obvious takeaway, but the issue is that he is now all but eliminated from leading Vandy to the SEC championship. And history suggests if you're going to be idle during conference title weekend, you've probably got to be sitting there close to 40 touchdowns to win the Heisman Trophy. Okay. He's at 24 right now, and he has already been outplayed by Ty Simpson in that head to head. Should still be in this discussion. I'm not saying that he's out of this discussion, but winning the award, I think, is very unlikely now. Um, Especially considering not only Simpson, but Julian Sayin, Ohio State officially launched his Heisman campaign today. Fernando Mendoza continues to win games by a billion. Jeremiah Smith, like there are just a lot of guys at the top right now who it'd be really hard for Pavia to probably usurp them. And winning this game, I think we'd be having a different conversation. But ultimately, that's probably how he's going to be viewed.
Yeah, and I think too, in an era where kind of the new clock rules where we've seen like defenses have kind of taken a step back across the board. Yeah, there's still some elite defenses in the SEC, but we've seen, your Georgias, your Alabamas start to get in more of these shootouts this year. Vandy is a team that's built to shorten games. And so by the end of the year, not only are you looking at a team that would miss out on conference championship weekend, but you end up with a team that basically misses an entire full game or two of offensive snaps because they just run the ball, bleed the clock, play smash mouth football. So by the end of the year, it could look like, wait, did Ty Simpson play 16 games? Like, why does it look like his attempts are so much higher?
Yeah, and pre Heisman numbers, like they do carry significance, and playing in a conference championship game, it tends to matter unless you're having a 2023 Jaden Daniels season. It is a difficult thing to do. Travis Hunter, a guy that was obviously in a very unique situation with what he was able to do over the course of the regular season. So
Played a ton of
again,
snaps.
true, just an award based on snaps, right? Nothing else.
But you got to have those opportunities, right? And his
Yeah,
ability to play on defense created two players that could win the Heisman versus just one.
exactly. But people shouldn't be writing off Diego Pavia. I guess people shouldn't be writing off Texas because Lord knows I've done it each of the last 2 games and I've been proven wrong. So I have been calling them the most casual team in college football. I still stand by that. But you know what? At this point, Texas can kind of sell internally. Guys, we've been backs against the wall for almost a month now, and we're doing just fine. And hopefully, Texas is going to get healthier down the stretch if they get Michael Taft back, the captain, who maybe his absence was responsible for some of those coverage busts that they had there. But this is ideal if you're Texas after the conversations we had after the Florida game.
Yeah, and we could say, "Oh, fast start, you're no longer a slacker." No, no. As someone who's been accused of being a slacker, let me explain something to you. Slacking is such a way of art that you could be up big and go, "Guess what? I feel like I could start slacking." And so that's the thing. They were at a point where they could have put every narrative to bed. They could have said, "We're way better than Vandy. Of course, we're Texas." don't worry about the old me, worry about new year, new me, whatever. And it's like, no, you actually became nonchalant at a point where the game was completely out of hand and you put it back within reach, which is worse to me in my mind because it's like, hey, with Mississippi State, they had momentum and carried it through the next week. Now it's like, I guess you have something to yell about, but it's just so funny that they've been able to kind of find the exact moment where they can start carrying and the exact moment where they can stop carrying.
Big narrative game too. Arch gets off to the fast start. I saw a few people, showing his box score like, oh, like Chase Daniel was doing this. Like Arch Manning haters are probably sick. Seeing the start that he got off to, it's like, all right, the 75-yard touchdown to start the game is on a swing pass to Ryan Wingo that I thought was going to be out of his reach, and Wingo makes a really nice play in space to be able to kind of collect himself, and then Texas blocks well on that side of the field, and he's gone. And the play that got like 14 yards to nibble it, that looks like it was going to be another touchdown, was a screenplay behind the line of scrimmage. It was like it was the like reverse, like the jet sweep flea flicker that they did or whatever it was. A lot of trickeration, and like basically half of his yards to that point were behind the line of scrimmage type throws. And I said to you, it feels like the Quinn Ewers offense in a lot of different ways. And it's not to discredit Arch, because if you could just execute at a Quinn Ewers level right now, this team is a college football playoff team. It just is. But the problem is that there are still probably going to be some of those moments. And Arch played well in this game. Like, I don't want to take away from him, but it is funny seeing the narratives come out when, okay, this is scheme and guys making plays in space, which you need that. That's part of a quarterback stat line. I get that, but let's kind of chill with some of the narratives that come out when he gets off to a good start, thanks to a swing pass that goes for 75.
Speaking of narratives, let's all just really inspect the AP votes that are probably going to be out by the time this podcast drops, because they're going to be separate groups of people, right? They're going to be groups of people who, didn't have access to television. They're going to be people who turned the game
Oh,
off
God, Will,
whenever
you're right.
whenever it got out of hand. They're going to be
Ugh.
so we're going to see Texas like in the top 10. We're going to see Texas out of the top, I bet, because so many people had different like takes on this game. Because I guess if you turned it off, you were technically right. Like, don't let your eyes deceive you. But that says something about Texas. So I think there are going to be so many AP votes that were so confusing. And again, build that in. People like switching television providers. People trying to figure this out. It's going to be a really interesting week for the AP poll.
And the college football playoff poll, which first one comes out on Tuesday night. All
Oh
right.
gosh, could you imagine the families, the kids, the grandkids of those college football playoff people getting called? Hey, do I have Fubo? Do I got Roku? What's Roku? How do I get on this? Like,
I
we could have
forgot about
complete
that.
games getting missed.
Oh, buddy. Interesting times these are. Georgia, Florida, cocktail party. Should have been on CBS, not on CBS, whatever. We got through it. Thriller, as promised. Thriller in this game. Georgia rallies late yet again. Stop me if you've heard that before. At this point, it's inevitable. It is inevitable. And in hindsight, I think the most shocking thing with Georgia's season is that Georgia dropped the fourth quarter touchdown pass against Bama, because the body of work says that pass should be completed.
Not against Bama.
But yeah, I guess not against Bama, but just in terms of the 2025 lens that we're looking through, everything about this team says it's just going to seize that moment and make that big time play. 5 of 6 SEC games that Georgia's played this year, and they have not led in 5 of those 6 games. And 5 of 6 SEC games, they have won. This is not necessarily the formula that you draw up, but there are worse identities to have. And there's an understanding with this team that as soon as that door is cracked open, they're going right through it. It's different than playing with your food and then just being like, you know what? We're playing down to our competition, and every game feels like what Mizzou did, a few years ago when they were playing that game in Columbia, and it feels like, this team just really doesn't have things figured out. Maybe that's going to be the spin for some who don't watch this team. I'm more impressed with the clutch plays that they make to get to these places. And you could say, well, why aren't they up by 50? It's different era of college football. It just kind of is, and I have a little bit more grace to this. I'm trying to open up my mind to that more so, and it's why we talked about this game feeling like it was going to be close going in. And I don't know, I came away more impressed that Georgia is just continuing to find ways down the stretch to just whatever it needs in these clutch moments, it seemingly always gets.
Yeah, I think we can look back at, like the App State Michigan game, and everybody was like, this has never happened before. This is the craziest thing we've ever seen. This is like, you have this wagon at Michigan, and they've have this pedigree and all that. And you look now, and it's like every week, if it's a rivalry game, if it's not at home, you could just go ahead and circle that and say, hey, even if you're Texas and you are at home, and you're technically a more talented team, you're going to have this lull. The other team's going to come back. And I think, like we talked about, it's a great product, but it's confusing people who don't watch as much football as we. Again, we were sent us to watch the Kentucky game. This is not a flex, guys. Like I wish sometimes I didn't have to watch these games, right? But that being said, like if you just kind of are a casual football fan and you just watch your teams and you're tuning in and out, you're going, hey, this isn't how it used to be. They don't look like 2015 Bama. I don't think there is a 2015 Bama this year. Maybe we haven't really seen Ohio State get tested. We saw the stat that they didn't allow a first half touchdown this year. Well, they did against 3-4 Penn State this weekend. You know what I'm saying? So it's just hard to see. But that being said, we talked about this with the DeBoer teams. We'll say the same thing about Kirby Smart. The best thing you can have in this age is to be able to trust your guy. And at Georgia, there is
Yep.
not a coach in college football that has earned more trust or goodwill from hopefully his own fan base, right? Even to where he's picked up Mike Bobo and said, "You are my son, trust him as well." So I think, and that's where we're at with Glenn Schumann too, where it's like, hey, maybe this defense doesn't look great, but it's Kirby Smart. He'll probably figure it out. And until he doesn't, right? Which last year the circumstances surrounding the playoff were a little bit weird. Her quarterback. Now, granted, the quarterback was, maybe you have a better quarterback now than the one that was hurt, right? But that being said, that's not what you prepared for. So, until Georgia really has one of these performances in the postseason, in the playoff, not just the SEC championship game, because they've had that and survived it, more so the actual playoff against non-SEC teams where it's just a shellacking. I think we just got to assume they're going to figure it out because they keep doing it within the context of every game that we count them out of.
And in different ways too. And it's not like they're digging their it's not like they dig themselves into holes with inexplicable turnovers or something like that. Or, like obviously they've had moments in which, man, the run fits are just not necessarily there. Why do they not just have those dudes in the secondary? I'm by no means am I saying this is anything perfect or vintage or something like that, but it's still impressive. And this is still really hard to do, especially with 18 to 22-year-old kids. Um, First of all, on the Florida side, Florida had big time interim coach energy, big time with Billy Gonzalez. Loved the fight, loved how fast my head turned every time I heard Ryan O'Hara said on the broadcast, only to turn and see that man was most definitely not my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but dare I say, he had a better offensive game plan than Billy Napier. DJ
You know
Lagway
what's
design
crazy
runs.
about this Florida team is just seeing how woefully unprepared they were under Billy Napier to where even when you have like the head coach energy, there are just fundamental things about the game of football that this team has never been taught where like the yoke is off and they want and have the ability to win this game. They had the talent to win this game, but it's just like these little weird things like you don't know this rule, you don't know the stuff that would always haunt them with Billy. But more so, like in terms of like it would get Billy more than it got them, but it's almost like no one left the rule book when Billy left to go teach them the stuff they never knew, you know?
Yeah, and they're right there once again. But they're always going to be there in these games, and feeling like they have a chance to be competitive. And you just also get the sense that they're not going to be able to make the right plays down the stretch. It would have been all sorts of ironic if Florida would have found a way to beat Georgia and earned its first ranked win away from the swamp since the 2020 cocktail party. The effort was there. It definitely was. Tyreek Sapp, Jaden Baugh, Trey Wilson. Man, Trey Wilson. Welcome back, Trey Wilson. About time you looked like the comeback player of the year that one of us picked you to be. Those guys played their tails off. They did everything in their power to win this game, and it clearly meant a lot to them. So I don't want to discredit that. That's not going to be discussed nationally, but I do remember watching Florida after McElwain was fired in 2017. And he's fired right after losing the cocktail party, fake death scandal, all that stuff. And that was a Florida team that was ready to be done with the season. And you just don't know. The problem, though, is that in this instance, in a game of inches, Florida just doesn't have the guys who make big time plays, and Georgia does. The 4th-and-1 stop when Florida's up 20-17 halfway through the fourth quarter felt like when it felt like that was when the game was decided. Play before it, I thought DJ Lagway was losing control of the football as he's going down. Ends up not mattering because Georgia is able to get that 4th down stop, even with the Jordan Hall injury. They're able to get that stuff in the middle. There's Elijah Griffin, true freshman, that steps up in that moment as well. But that's like the inch that Georgia needs to say, all right, now we pounce. Now we pounce, and now we go. They get some really poised plays by Gunnar Stockton. They get a cutback run from Chauncey Bowens, 36-yard touchdown. When Georgia's rushing attack in the second half to that point, 9 carries for 1 yard. And still, 36-yard touchdown is the difference in this one. And you're looking at, instead of this being a potential 27-17 Florida lead, Georgia is suddenly up 24-20, and Florida fans are wondering how in the world that happened. That's just what Georgia does.
I would actually kind of push back on that, where I think that Florida has struggled to make the small time plays. I think that these big spectacular plays
Fair.
are
That's
exactly
fair.
what Florida has actually kind of been able to do. You know, when you look at the Texas game, when you look at when they have been successful under Billy Napier, it's that they can have these ridiculous things where you're like, this is one of the most talented rosters in the SEC. Like, ball is like knocking dudes to the side, like spinning out of tackles. The pick, that was one of the most athletic, like football poetry picks, right? Where it's like one hand grab. And it's like, I think the big plays are often enough to carry Florida, but where they kind of get beaten by Georgia is in the aggregate. It's over the course of the amount of plays, the amount of snaps, where Georgia doesn't make as many of these mistakes, like where guys don't know the route, or the protection is off and the quarterback gets smacked, stuff like that. So I think it's their propensity for, again, not knowing the rule book, mistakes, stuff like that, and like that catch is just such a
Let's talk
heartbreaking
about it.
play. Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Because some people might be screaming at whatever device you're listening to this and going, what do you mean Georgia doesn't make those plays? Georgia let J. Michael Sturtevant get behind the secondary for like 10, 15 yards in a game in which they're leading by 24-20. It's 3:16 to play. It's this huge moment. Georgia just, I don't know what in the world happened on that play. But for those who missed this play, Georgia has this coverage bus, and if DJ Lagway hits an in-stride J. Michael Sturtevant, it is a walk-in touchdown, and Florida takes the lead. Does Georgia still probably come back and make a play down the stretch? I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't, but that was not the case. And Sturtevant has to come back to the ball, and he looks like initially, in my opinion, that he had made the catch. Lagway had underthrown him, so he's coming back to the ball, and I think it's a catch, even though it's ruled incomplete. I'm sure plenty of Florida fans thought it was a catch in real time, maybe even some Georgia fans as well. And that is significant, in my opinion, because probably however you saw it in real time, you probably stuck with your opinion after seeing the replay. Is that how you felt?
Yes. And you could hear like the audible gasp whenever, as soon as it was replayed in the stadium, because they were showing Florida fans on the replay, and it was like, oh my God, that looks like a catch, and then it turns into anger and like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But I'm right there with you. No one would ever accuse me of being a, Florida homer or anything, but I saw that and I was like, hey, again, not to do the logo thing, but it's like we've seen these plays in this game go towards Georgia. Remember the play? I forgot the player, but the ball was kind of moving on the ground. It was trapped right here a couple years ago, and like that's one where it's like, hey, unless you can see definitively. And again, that's part of this overturning the call. So that's the secret sauce here, is that refs can always fall back on indisputable video evidence. But I think in a moment like that, you'd probably want to get the call right. And our guy Neil Blackman, I think, also nailed it, which is that if the throw was just a little bit more online, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. And for what it's worth, Billy Gonzalez said afterwards that he did not think it was a catch. Was asked point blank, did you think it was a catch? Nope. And he kept it moving. So maybe that's going to diffuse this a little bit. It's still going to be one of those moments that is approved film 6 times to Sunday. Like my guy Perry's texting me about it literally right now as we're talking about it. Ironically enough, his ears must have been buzzing, and he was there, and it was different vantage point being in the stadium. But yeah, that's just the type of play that Florida doesn't get, because ultimately they can't recover from that. They turn it over on downs, ball game. And look, I'm not saying they win that game or that we know that they would have scored a touchdown, because you still needed a touchdown and you're 21 yards away against a really good, talented Georgia defense. And I don't know. I just come away from this game thinking, if you're going to leave it up to chance against Georgia, it's not actually up to chance. They say 50-50 balls are not 50-50 balls when the wide receiver is Randy Moss. That's Georgia. You just can't assume that's going to go your way, and you just have to find ways to be able to put this team away, because they're Michael Myers, man. They just kind of are, and even when you think you have them kind of dead to rights or playing with house money like Florida was, they're just too good in these spots. So I've said enough too many complimentary things about a Georgia team that a lot of people probably are going, Connor, they're very flawed. They're very flawed. But the question I ask, Will, is Georgia becoming 2024 Ohio State? I know people are going to push back on that because we have the body of work that Ohio State showed us in the college football playoff, okay? I am not saying that they are at that level of dominance. I'm not saying that they have that type of upside. But what I will say, if Georgia goes into the college football playoff field having no SEC championship appearance, TBD on how that's going to play out, and we're all going, well, they're hosting a home playoff game. They haven't really played their best football yet. All of a sudden, we could see them drop the hammer in a first round game and go, oh boy, this team maybe has figured it out and maybe has paced itself in the way that it needed to. So I'm just saying, because this time last year, nobody was saying Ohio State's the best team in college football. They have the highest upside because of the way that it played out against Oregon. A close, down to the wire rivalry loss in which you could look back on one play and go, hey, can't say that they're the best if they weren't able to be able to get that win. So I'm just saying, I'm at least open to that idea more so than probably the vast majority of people are.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it again, nothing is ever 1-to-1, right? But you talk about the, Oregon game similar to Alabama. I think you look at the Penn State win as similar to Ole Miss, right? Where it's like, hey, and again, Penn State is hard
No,
to.
that's true. That's a good comp. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it, right? Because again, this year we know what we know now, and then we go, okay, well that team was never that good. This is a team that won a playoff game last year. This is like it was not a bad Penn State team. They were number 3 at that point.
Two playoff
But
games last year.
yeah, you're right. And so which just kind of makes it even funnier. Anyway, so but that being said, that second loss for Ohio State didn't even come until Michigan, right? And so Georgia's obviously still kind of looking to find that. And I guess there is no Michigan on the schedule, right? It would be I guess Georgia Tech, which is a pretty good football team if that were to happen. So
TBD on that though,
yeah,
because I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that you could say that Georgia Tech would be considered like the Michigan when Georgia has obviously had Georgia Tech's number in the Kirby Smart era. So probably not a fair. It's not a direct comp, but I just mean from the standpoint of what's the scariest thing to see in the college football playoff when we're filling out these brackets and we're trying to figure out, could this team win a national title? Could that team win a national title? The questions that we could be asking about Georgia could feel eerily similar to 2024 Ohio State. Maybe not a better overall collection of talent with all the different guys that return for Ohio State and whatnot. But if all of a sudden Georgia is getting healthy at the exact right time with that type of, hey, nobody's really picking us to win a title, it might take 60 minutes of football for that to change. Just saying.
Yeah, and this is exactly what a coach like Kirby Smart has always been trying to manufacture behind the scenes,
Correct.
which is the doubt, right? Which is that we put out that comp and everyone goes, "This team is too flawed. The defense is soft." Da da da. But that's exactly kind of what we heard about Ohio State, that they were resting in their laurels. Like the defense was soft, that they had all these 5 stars who didn't have any heart, and it was the NIL era. Dot dot dot. Well, with Georgia, and again, there's no Jeremiah Smith on this team, right? But you can kind of, in the aggregate, get some of those guys together with the branches and the guys that they do have. But what it comes down to is that Ohio State embraced that physicality. They were able to get the turnovers and the big plays. I think for Georgia, they're going to need to be more consistent on defense, which feels insane to keep
Agreed.
saying year after year. Like, I don't think that Georgia has the ability for chaos on defense that Ohio State had because they can't sack the quarterback. They can't force TFLs in big moments. They can in big moments, but they can in regular moments, right? And so I think that's what it's going to come down to is, do we have an elevation from the offense, or do we have a what would be the opposite of a regression, an
A
aggression to the
progression.
mean, an aggression to the mean for the defense?
Yeah. I'm just I'm more and more intrigued by Georgia the more we see. When we see Zachariah Branch have a game like that, man, he was really, really good in this one. You just get to a certain point where you're not lucky anymore. And you just believe that you can come back. And that is truly a mindset. And you have an identity in these close games. And I just wonder how many of these teams are going to get to the college football playoff and look up. And even my alma mater, Indiana, where all of a sudden, how many close games have they played in? They played in a game at Iowa. You figure Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, if and when that comes, that's probably going to be a close game as well. But how many of these games are going to be true dogfights? And yes, pun very much intended. So, look, there's going to be room for interpretation with this Georgia team. I understand that. And I just thought it was really fitting, Will, that as Carson Beck threw a back-breaking interception in overtime of a Miami loss, second Miami loss once again, that happened just as Gunnar Stockton led this masterful opening TD drive in Jacksonville. Felt very
Yeah,
fitting.
I mean, this game was a complete, just like everything coming together moment for Georgia, right? Where it goes, okay, last year you had this returning quarterback who had all these accolades. He at that point already had like the famous girlfriend. We talked about the Jets and all that, and what it appears looking back, it sounded insane. We talked about it at the time, but it's like Beck's energy was so kind of negative and overpowering that it made everybody else worse. Because you look at this Georgia team now, and it's like, yeah, some of the drops were bad. I get that, but I don't think an entire football team suddenly remembered how to play football because they have a dude who runs the offense correctly. And so again, last year's Florida game, you have Florida probably should have beaten Georgia if they didn't have me playing quarterback, right? By the end of that game. And Carson Beck just tried and tried and tried to hand the game over. Well, here you're watching Carson Beck hand the ball over to SMU while Gunnar Stockton is not making those critical mistakes against Florida. And I think the final
Had the
score is
one
so.
pick. Yeah.
What's up?
Had the one pick in this
But
game after I
that
called out.
was
Yeah.
not a Beck pick. That was
Agreed. Yeah.
you throw your
Agreed.
controller if it happens in a video game
Yeah.
pick.
Fair. Yeah. No, that's fair. He's just better in those spots. He just is. And you know what? I don't know that ultimately he's going to be remembered in the same sort of way, but your hope if you were Georgia was that he turns into Stetson Bennett V. There is more evidence that those tools are there than not. And that's good. That's a win. That's all you can ask for at this point in the season. All right, well, South Carolina, Ole Miss. Let's start with the breaking news. Sorry if you saw me looking down on my phone a little bit. We had breaking news. Mike Shula is out as South Carolina's offensive coordinator per multiple reports. Yeah. Not a surprise. Not a surprise whatsoever. Brad Crawford and I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and it was just a matter of when. And this is the Oklahoma situation last year, where you just had a guy that was completely overwhelmed after being promoted from analyst to coordinator. And we just talked about Georgia, and maybe I should have said some nice things about Mike Bobo. You opt for continuity if you're Shane Beamer. We're going to get to the game in a second here, but we do need to talk about this. You try and opt for continuity, and instead, what you very quickly realize is this guy hasn't been calling plays to this level in a long time, and it kind of shows. And your quarterback, your very talented, decorated quarterback, is too much at the mercy of his OC. And like there were a couple of moments where I thought like you could see the camera as Shane Beamer saying some not so nice words to Mike Shula. Maybe he was going to come off the Bama game and kind of show they've turned the corner. This was not the game for that, even though there were a couple of bright Lenore Sellers moments. But Mike Shula out as South Carolina's OC. Shane Beamer will move on to his fourth offensive coordinator. He is in year 5, by the way. That's a lot. And Dow Loggins left on good standing. Marcus Satterfield did not, in my opinion. He left for Nebraska, but if they wanted to keep him, they would have kept him. So yeah, this is it's a bugaboo. It really, really is for Shane Beamer.
Yeah, I mean, we could joke about some of the stuff that we got wrong this offseason, but Mike Shula just felt like a train that I saw coming a mile away. I mean, it's Bo Pelini, right? It's just like, hey, you're a guy who has been around for too long. We have enough tape on you. You're not going to change your stripes. You're not going to change your spots. You're not going to suddenly be Lincoln Riley, And I think it's. I hate to say it's that simple, but he had such a chance against Alabama. And yeah, you could talk about the fumbles, but really what that was not capitalizing on the 2-point conversions, the red zone opportunities. Yeah, you miss a field goal, get your offense closer, get a better field goal attempt, right? So he had such an opportunity to be the hero, to save his job, to get revenge. How do you like me now against Alabama? That ends up not going their way. And then it's just kind of like, okay, where do we go from here? Because this team was still playing hard to a degree in this Ole Miss game, harder than you would kind of, or not you, but like a person would anticipate. But they just didn't have the scheme. They didn't have the ability to capitalize on any of that anger that they're feeling right now. And we have a desperate team, which they do. That's what you need. You just need to be able to go punch somebody in the mouth and keep it simple. And this offense is anything but that.
Just a really tough watch. We've said it so many times. So I don't want to repeat myself too much here, but as Lenore Sellers is getting sacked 6 times in this game, and meanwhile he's looking across the other sideline, and it's a Division II guy, Trinidad Chambliss, with Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. in his ear, and this portal receiver and that portal receiver, and this true freshman running back that's running all over you. I wonder how many times Lenore Sellers legitimately thought, I wonder what life is like on the other side, because he's not one that's I think he's had really good body language despite pretty crappy surroundings. And there were a couple of moments in this game in which like it turned. spiked the football once after a sack that he took, and he's just wondering, what do I got to do, man? What in the world do I have to do? Because even the interception that he threw, he's got to escape two different guys, and they're getting home on like a 2 and 3 man rush. And it's just, it was really, really bad. Really, really bad. The interception late to Suntaran Perkins was the moment in which this wasn't going to happen for South Carolina, who did fight. It did have some fight in this game and kept it relatively close, but the backbreaking run by Lacey was the dagger in this one. Yeah, I mean, kind of what we expect. I think I had 31-14 for this game and it ended up 30-14. So off by a point, my bad. I'll get it right next time. But yeah, you knew that Ole Miss was going to be able to lean on the ground game. Obvious flaws the South Carolina defenses had. And this was probably not going to be a 60-minute game. And for Ole Miss, who needed to not be in a 60-minute game for once, that was a really positive sign. South Carolina falls at 3-6. They need a win at Texas A&M in a couple of weeks to keep bowl hopes alive. And Will, I'm rooting for that, if for no other reason than we need Clemson and South Carolina to close the regular season fighting for a bowl berth. They're both at 3-6 or three. They're both 3-win teams right now. South Carolina 3-6, Clemson 3-5, just as we all predicted.
If you guys just see me like retweeting a bunch of random South Carolina stuff, just know I got to find a way to wade my algorithm into that part of Twitter because I got to know what those two fan bases are saying to each other right now. It's like, hey, you stink. Correct. And you as well. Also correct. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I think that, we talked about the worst thing you can be is boring, right? Say what you will about, some of these struggling teams that we've seen, but like Florida's not boring. You know what I'm saying? At this point, South Carolina is just like sim the season because we know they don't have the offensive firepower. The story of their quarterback will be that he was able to overcome some of this stuff at times, not that he was able to be in a position to win outside of last year, right? And I think that there's no reason to second guess his like college choice or anything because I think last year did so much for him. But that being said, this year was a completely wasted season where you had, preseason first team all SEC quarterback, easy to forget with how poorly they played on offense. But it just goes to show who you trust with your valuables, i.e., your quarterback, is so important. That guy is doing everything he can to win. You could question some of the sacks, some of the decisions he makes, but he's really just Russell Westbrook out there, and better to be the man in the arena than not. So, like I said, I think it's just kind of boring. Ole Miss keeps their playoff hopes, locked in. They have 0 ranked teams. They have the Citadel, Florida at home, and at Miss State, which that game can get weird, but it doesn't matter if they lose it because they only have 1 loss. So again, like we said last week, welcome to the playoff Ole Miss, and let's just try to keep everybody healthy. And on South Carolina's side, let's try to not overreact and do anything harsh with Shane Beamer.
Do you think that Ole Miss will feel like what Tennessee felt like last year? The last point you talked about being healthy going into the college football playoff. Huge. Tennessee obviously wasn't. I'm not saying that they've leaned too heavily on Lacey, and maybe they're, you know what, that's a bit unfair to say. I'm going to take that back. I don't like that comp, even if they end up 10-2, because I think Ole Miss's offense is more multifaceted. The more that I'm thinking this out, they're not just going to limp their way into the college football playoff. We just praised Georgia for playing in all these close games, so that feels hypocritical to say that. I'm not going to do that. But people will question their upside because if very likely this will be Ole Miss's first college football playoff berth, and their resume isn't going to age particularly well. It's just not. I don't say that to discredit them. They have the marquee road win, though. They have the Oklahoma win. And that's going to be a huge thing moving forward. And it's why at 10-2, even if they are 10-2 and not 11-1, they'll be sitting very, very pretty. But yeah, it is weird how this has played out, though. Like this just feels so different than last year for Ole Miss with all this pressure and late game situations, and they just can't get it done. And this team, it just kind of finds a way down the stretch, and they don't necessarily have to worry about that. They can be able to create in the ground game. I like that they use Chambliss more as a runner in this one as well. So Ole Miss and Georgia are going to be the teams that nobody's really talking about as much of, are they in this tier one? Can they win a national championship? And they're going to have, if and when they make the college football playoff, they're going to have the most close game experience of all these playoff teams, maybe with the exception of Georgia Tech. But Georgia outside of that, yeah. Say that again.
Georgia, are you lumping them in with Ole Miss?
Georgia and Ole Miss are going to have so much of that close game experience. And maybe we'll look back, we'll play the results with that. And we'll say, they were playing with fire this whole time. Or alternatively, you're going to have to play in 3 or 4 very close games. And I don't know. It just seems like Ole Miss right now is very much locked in to host a college football playoff game.
Well, don't forget they have waiting in the wings, the big time transfer, Logan Diggs. So if they need to, give Lacey a little bit of a breather because it's the Citadel, get Diggs out there, get him his couple carries. No, but I'm with you. I think that Ole Miss, where they're at right now, like everything on like ahead of them needs to kind of stay put, right? Because what you don't want if you're Ole Miss is chaos above you that just slides you into the SC championship game, and then you have to play in Alabama or A&M versus these kind of cupcakes that you have left where you could ride momentum and get there healthy. Like an SEC championship appearance, funny enough, for Ole Miss would be such a negative because what you don't want is to get battle tested against one of the best teams in America in one of those teams and
I
then
don't know.
have to go off of a loss. So I think from their standpoint, if they could just la la la, hey, their worst case scenario is an SEC championship appearance, which I don't think they've ever played in that game.
Right.
And
That's why I don't think it's bad. If you get there, then no longer can people make that joke about you.
yeah, I mean, but we've seen kind of, with some coaches that have recently gotten fired, not naming names, how an appearance doesn't really count as a win if you get outclassed as bad as some teams have. And so I'd say that to say it's not, it'd be their first playoff appearance too, and I think there's no reason why this team can't win a playoff game or two. And so I think that needs to be their focus at this point because they've already overcome so many things in this conference with, all the Lane Kiffin rumors, with the quarterback situation, with some of the injuries they had early, that it's like, hey, like let's again stem to the end of the season, stay healthy. Let's not do these high leverage innings that you were talking about before we have to, and hope that the teams that we play have had their conference championship game, have had their rivalry game, because what we've seen at a Miss State, I guess they can keep it close with anyone. Maybe that's their talent. But you shouldn't be doing that with them either this year.
Agreed. And ultimately, Ole Miss is in a spot that very few teams in college football are, which is sitting there with one loss and seemingly going into this home stretch as a double-digit favorite in all these games. I would think, at least, but we'll see because this is life in the SEC this year. Okay, teams that have not been double-digit favorites in football games this year: Mississippi State and Arkansas. Will, my God, hug an Arkansas fan. Find if you see anyone over the course of the next, I don't know, ever, just you don't need to introduce yourself. If they're wearing Arkansas apparel, just go up to them. They're there. Cry on my shoulder. It's gonna be okay. Um, Hug a Mississippi State fan, by the way, as well, because winning an SEC game for the first time in 2 years had to feel really, really good. First of the Jeff Levy era, especially scoring 17 straight points in the fourth quarter. Big time fourth down conversions by Blake Shapen, who felt like QB2 to Kamario Taylor at certain points of that game. Taylor had some juice, man, coming out of halftime. That was fun to see. Awesome moment for Mississippi State. Happy for Jeff Levy, not happy for Brandon Walker. We talked about how, at the very least for Mississippi State, these last three games will feel significant if you're able to win this game against Arkansas, because there's a bowl berth up for grabs in each of these games. And at the very least, you're going into the Egg Bowl with the possibility of getting to the postseason, which matters when you won 2 games last year and you're coming off consecutive seasons in which you missed the postseason. Okay. So like that is all good. Okay. It really is. And Mississippi State, in a game of two teams that could not get out of their own way, finally got out of its own way. And that was the good thing. Okay. Arkansas. As I'm watching Taylon Green get slammed to the ground, running parallel to his own goal line on a last ditch effort after his team blew yet another fourth quarter lead, I had the thought that I know Arkansas fans have had for so long. Enough is enough. Why? Why does it have to be like this? I cannot think of what they did to deserve this type of torture. Okay. Arkansas is 2-7, and the only game in which they haven't at least been in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter was Notre Dame. And now they had 2 blowout wins. So I'm saying, like, at the very, like, that's the furthest they've been behind in the fourth quarter was that Notre Dame game. All these SEC games, hey, 1-score game in the fourth quarter. Outscored 34-7 in the fourth quarter the last 2 weeks in home games against SEC teams that had not won a conference game yet. Bad. Real bad. Arkansas went up 14 points in the fourth quarter and then gained a total of 19. Or my brain is just all over the place. Gained a total of minus 14 yards on 3 possessions after that. They lost 19 on the intentional grounding. But even if that's an incompletion, 5 yards gained after going up 14. I just need to know what Arkansas did in this life to deserve this. Because if this is all about Robert Patrick on a motorcycle and a neck brace, I think we need to move on. And if this is all about rehiring him and saying, oh, that didn't matter, we're just going to pretend that, oh, everything is fine. Look, this stuff was still happening in 2023 to Arkansas. Okay. So this isn't just a Robert Patrick thing. The statute of limitations has to be up with all this. And I'm at a loss. Like, I'm open to ideas for Arkansas, Will. I think we need a marketing campaign. I think we need, this is your suit, not mine. We need a rebranding here. Like, what if Arkansas switched to black and silver? Switch colors, switch mascots,
The
anything at this
Silverbacks.
point.
Yeah.
Just something, because this ain't it. Build a new stadium, whatever. Rip it up. As John Neighbor said, rip it up, blow it all up, start over. This is pain. This is torture. Nobody deserves this.
I mean, it's so crazy, right? Because the Bobby Petrino experience is such a bender where you start off and you're hopeless, and it's like, hey, okay, Memphis, Notre Dame, we're getting cooked. We got to bring in Bobby P to be the adult in the room. You have a close game against Tennessee, a close game against Texas A&M. Okay, well, like we're competitive, and then you just fall off an absolute cliff against like the two of the three worst teams in the SEC. Kentucky's not in there, unfortunately for them. But that being said, I feel like they'd probably lose to Kentucky right now, which is crazy. But I don't know, because it'd be a weird game. So yeah, at least they traveled to LSU. Maybe there's some opportunity for chaos there. But I say that to say, like, now we fully entered the hangover, wake up the next morning, oh gosh, what did I do? I called my boss at 2 a.m. and quit. Like, now we're in this is why Bobby Petrino is not your head coach and probably will not be a coach or head coach in the SEC. I am, of course, talking about he had 18 penalties for 193 yards. He is sunglassless, screaming at the referee. It's just ugly. It's just not what you want to see. It's embarrassing in front of company. So this is why you don't hire the fun uncle to be your coach.
It does feel like the dinner party in some ways. It really does. This is just not how you act in front of. Speaking of which, I've got a crying toddler in the background. Don't give us a 1-star review as a result of that. But yeah, we're at a place right now where you can't blame Sam Pittman as much as it probably felt like you should have when all these close losses are happening and he's no longer there. And you can say, oh, it's the roster that he assembled. It's just Arkansas. It's just Arkansas, man. I don't know what else to say at this point. And you're not moving past this until someone just totally changes the mindset of everything in that building right now, because they are a walking, devastating loss. That is all they are. Maybe Hunter Yurachek, that results in him losing his job after the way that things have played out in recent memory. But it is so bad, Will. Hug an Arkansas fan. Hug a hog.
Hug a hog, yeah. I saw people like, hey, whatever James Franklin's asking for, offer to double it. We got to get some normalcy in here. And if you got Calipari and James Franklin as your two head coaches, you're just setting yourself up for even more clinching. But I think it would be an upgrade to just have someone who knows how to coach a football team and not be emotional. So yeah, I think that's it, man. They went from like a sad team to a mad team, and like if mad doesn't win you football games when you have that level of talent.
Kentucky, Auburn. 2 questions, Will. One is, who's going to be the next Auburn coach? And do we want to talk about this game?
Yeah, I was going to say I either have way more than 2 questions or way less. Now, I feel like this was a game that was either everything or it didn't matter at all, because boy, was it a rough, confusing. Did you see the quarterback stat line at halftime, Connor?
I don't have it offhand, but I remembered looking at it thinking, how has Ashton Daniels completed 6 passes? 5 passes? With that good of a receiving room that was totally ineffective against the Kentucky defense that let up 56 points last week.
Yeah, I think the best way, and again, like the second half often happens, but this one was just about the same. So Cutter Boley, 6 of 13 for 42 yards and a pick. Ashton Daniels, 6 of 14 for 42 yards. They had the exact same amount of yards, one fewer attempt, but a pick on the other side. So the difference was a pick, and they were just in a rock fight. It was like a rock.
No, not a fight.
Not a fight.
Yeah,
not a fight.
Not with these offenses.
Commune.
No. By the way, we're recording this at 1:22 Eastern time. Pete Nakos reported that meetings have already been canceled for Auburn. We're assuming that Hugh Freeze is fired. Okay. It's not official yet. based on everything we've seen so far, I'd be stunned if he is not gone. If that was not your last straw, I don't know what a last straw is, apparently. But this was the end. This was the end, because while I don't want to totally take away from what Kentucky did, great bounce back from that defense, a vintage Mark Stoops win, if there is such a thing these days, to win that game 10-3 on the road. Happy for that locker room. They've endured a lot of crappy moments over the course of the last 2-3 years. So good for them. But seeing how bad the passing offense was, you already hit on the halftime numbers. I don't know for the life of me how Hugh Freeze can continue to get up to the post-game podium. And I'm legitimately saying this is something that I think is really impressive, that he could get up to the post-game podium and say with a straight face, "We're close." How can you do that and not just burst out laughing at this point? It's actually impressive that he believes such a lie, that he's able to present it to the world. Like I don't have that kind of faith, and I'm watching this team as well. Nobody in that stadium, which again looks like it was electric, was of the belief that the offense was going to find a way down the stretch. I mean, they threw a Hail Mary in the last play of the game that went to no one. It looked like the receivers were jogging on that play. If they wanted to just sit down at the 35-yard line, I wouldn't have blamed them. I said Cam Coleman was going to have a career day in this one, and he was Auburn's leading receiver with five catches for 34 yards, because Hugh Freeze does not have a clue about offensive football anymore, and they're not close. They're just so not close. I don't know how else to say. That is not what close looks like when you're losing like that in that fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only difference we can pick up on between this press conference and the others was that instead of kind of lashing out and circling the wagons, it was like, how did he say it? Like, in this day and age, there's not a lot of patience, but he didn't say it as if like everyone else was wrong. It was more like he knew that the
He
environment
knows.
was that there wasn't a lot of patience, if, even in his own mind's eye, where he's like, you were expected to do better than this. And I mean, honestly, to answer your question, like I know we've talked about faith more than I'd probably like to on here, but I guess as a man of faith, he is truly just praying for a miracle a la the Red Sea parting type. I mean, I guess in the way that you never know what can happen, and sometimes people can totally change their lot in life, and miracles happen that this offense could change. But outside of that, it is
No,
literally a miracle. That is what it would take.
it's unbelievable. Worst offensive showing for a Hugh Freeze coach team since the hospital bed game. Yep. The thumbs up to Dino Babers, Syracuse, 2019. And Liberty got shut out that day. This felt maybe even worse. Yeah, we'll recap the resume, because my God, it's bad. He's now lost 7 of 8 home games at Jordan-Hare to power conference competition. 7 of the last 8, that is. Against power conference competition at Jordan-Hare, he's 2-10, which matches the win total that one Diego Pavia has at Jordan-Hare. By the way, Diego Pavia next week in Nashville, just in case things needed to get worse for Auburn. 1 win against a ranked opponent, just as many as previous lad of the week Alex Mortensen, UAB's interim coach, had as well. In 25 games against power conference competition under Freeze, how many times has Auburn hit 25 points, Will?
25. Okay, give me the number of total now.
25 and 25. 25 games against power conference competition. How many times have they hit 25 points?
I'm going to say 6 times, Connor.
That is correct. You looked at the notes. That's fine. Whatever.
I didn't look at the notes. That was a guess. That's why I asked you to
Really?
restate it. If I was looking at the notes, I wouldn't have asked for the number again.
You could actually play that off and cheat, and nobody would actually know. And
Well,
I
no,
would
I'm
just be
stupid. That's the thing about me is I'll tell you when I don't know something. All these guesses are real. I could have said 15 just as easily as 6.
6, 3 of which happened in year 1. So good on you for knowing that. Just a train wreck. Such a bad, disappointing era of football to watch, and Auburn now staring at its 5th consecutive losing season. And you think, how could things have been differently for Hugh Freeze? Is this all about in-game management? Is this all about the decision to continue to have this myriad of play callers? Was this all a whiff on QB evaluation? Or is this just simply a guy that isn't built to be at this level of football right now and doesn't understand the margin for error? I think it's kind of all of it, you know?
Yeah, and I'm trying to see. I mean, I guess the only time like they beat A&M, but it was like on that weird 2-point conversion. It wasn't like a how do you like me now? Like
Dropped by Amari Daniels in the fourth overtime of a game in which they led by 3 scores, I believe, and A&M came all the way back.
yeah, exactly. It's like it wasn't like, oh, they got out to this big lead or whatever, like even a la the Georgia game. I mean, there was just so much in place, honestly, for him to be successful. And you know what's
Yeah.
crazy? I had one of my friends kind of tell me that I was like this Hugh Freeze apologist. And I was like, what I had said when he got hired was that he is not a good, off the field, all of his stuff is negative, right? And not all of it. No one's an evil person, but the baggage is undeniable. But I said the history of offensive success is also undeniable when you look at the NFL and the amount of guys that have at least played for him, like take out development, whatever you would. There have been even several NFL quarterbacks at this point that have played, in and around his system. And so the totally just baffling thing is that they were never able to establish any kind of an offensive identity, be it, more of the grounded pound that they've had at times, be it the high flying offense they've had at times. Hugh Freeze has been able to adapt at almost every stop except for Auburn. It just didn't make any sense.
He replaced Brian Harsin. We always talk about don't be the guy to replace the guy. Replace Brian Harsin. All you have to do is show up with an authentic Southern accent and have a top 15 recruiting class, and you're already considered an upgrade. And yet, Hugh Freeze did so many things wrong outside of those parameters. And it wasn't necessarily about the talent acquisition. They said we're gonna get the high school talent. We're gonna pick our spots in the portal. And they had some hits in the portal. Like let's not totally dismiss that and what it's meant to kind of see some of these guys pop. Like they've had success. Like Keandre Lambert Smith was a great portal ad. Eugene Asante, like these guys are good players that their staff evaluated and didn't just say, well, we're only going to win with high school players. It wasn't that they just did that. It was that they did too many other things wrong. And for a team and at a time in which the margin for error is so slim, I feel like I've said that a million times today, he was not going to be the guy to overcome that. And that's something that became very painfully obvious. Call it hubris, call it ego, whatever. But what?
Hubris. I like that.
Sure, why not? It wasn't just, oh, I'm gonna not give my running back the carry in the entire fourth quarter and just assume that Peyton Thorne is gonna go win me a football game or Jackson Arnold or whoever. Like it just nothing went right for Hugh Freeze with the buttons that he tried to push, and ultimately, this is another failure, and Auburn going to its fourth coach in the 2020s is a tough pill to swallow. So candidates, my list, Will, Lane. I mean, if he's a slideshow away from taking that job a few years ago, he's on the list. Duh. Eli
But
Drinkowitz.
worth noting that Auburn has only gotten worse because you hit on the Brian Harsin thing. I mean, the case could be made that Hugh Freeze got worse as time went on and as he lost Harsin's players, right? Because Harsin left some dogs over, as far as some of the running backs and some of the guys on the lines. Like,
Eh,
and you could even say those are old Gus guys. That's fine, but this team unquestionably kind of got worse as time went on. To where even look at the Kentucky game last year versus this year. So yeah, it's like Ole Miss has gotten better. Lane Kiffin's profile has been raised, and Armour has gotten worse than what he considered. Is all I'm saying.
Probably. Yeah, things have changed. There has been a material change. You still have to, if you're Auburn, say, hey, Lane, so how close were you? Eli Drinkowitz is going to be part of that conversation. If there's any thinking, let's get back to Gus, then Drink is kind of your ticket to do that. As odd as that sounds, and maybe Auburn fans would push back on that, but someone that has SEC coaching experience and poaching from within the conference, a guy that's beaten you to the last, in consecutive years here, maybe that would be attractive. I don't know.
By
John
the way,
Summerall,
official
though.
tweet is now out by Pete Nakos. They have
Oh,
fired Hugh Freeze. So you
officially.
can't fool us again, college football. We're not going to do a segment without knowing that. We knew. You, Paul, don't lie. You can't fool us. So now we've assumed he's been fired and we're correct.
How about that? How about that? Yes. Officially, official. This was going to happen. Hugh Freeze knew it the second he walked out of that stadium to fire Hugh Chance. Like this was always going to happen. So yeah, the candidate list though, Lane Drink, John Summerall is probably the one that makes the most sense for all parameters, given his experience in the state. And, we've talked very highly of John Summerall as a defensive-minded guy, and you still have the ability to go out and get a big-time offensive coordinator, which we know that role is going to be scrutinized at Auburn. But I do think that he deserves to be on that list. And Fran Brown, even though this year has been really bad, maybe the timing's not going to line up with the way that they've handled the quarterback situation. But a month ago, they're winning that game at Clemson, and we're saying, dang, Fran Brown coming off of getting National Coach of the Year award, 10-win season in year one with Kyle McCord, an Ohio State cast off, and the things that they did. So like that could be someone who is considered attractive coming from the Kirby Smart coaching tree. And then Brent Key. Brent Key is only being discussed for the Florida job, as odd as that sounds. And I know that Georgia Tech lost on Saturday, so they're no longer undefeated, but there are very few coaches right now that have done all the things that Brent Key did, where you could actually say we could probably make it worth his while to make him say no. He's only making $4.5 million. He would be the first Nick Saban disciple at Auburn, which would be interesting when you think about it. At least as the head coach, not including like Will Muschamp as a DC or something like that. So that's different, obviously. But yeah, that's kind of the list as I see it right now. What are your thoughts on that list, or anybody else that come to mind for you?
I think that Auburn needs to just right now set out to go get one of those program builder guys, like you talked about, Summerall, a key, because, as more quote unquote big time coaching vacancies come open, and as more and more guys, even, like the Matt Rules and the Rhett Lashleys of the world are getting extended. Somebody had a tweet, I forgot who it was, but it's kind of just a given right now. It's not even an opinion. There are going to be some funny coaching hires this season. And I think if you're Auburn, you got to know what you got, which is, hey, you're kind of seeing this a little bit chaotic here. Not in the same way that LSU is chaotic, but you don't have their level of talent. You're always going to be kind of, and I hate to say this, but it's true. You're always going to be the second university in Alabama with the way that DeBoer has things running. So whoever goes into that job is going to be thrown into the fire at least once a year. And you look at Georgia, you look at some of the rivalries that they have across the SEC. So that being said, I think they might as well just take the thought of like a Lane Kiffin out of their head and just start really saying, hey, Summerall, you're our first choice. No one else is going to tell you that. LSU, Florida are not going to tell you that. Key, you're our first choice. We're going to start talking to you right now and not get caught and all this different stuff. But one thing about the Auburn dysfunction is that they do have money and they're not scared to spend, and they haven't been scared to spend. And so that being said, I think they are going to swing for some of those big fish, but I'd say they're pretty clearly the third SEC job ahead of like Arkansas,
I think so as well. Maybe, who knows with LSU these days? If LSU is considered the top job, but yeah, $15.4 million. That was the buyout. Third time in 5 years that they're paying an 8-figure buyout to a coach. Yeah, that's tough, but better buyout setup with Hugh Freeze, the monthly payments, not a Mark Stoops situation where it's all the money in the first 60 days or something crazy like that. So you can stomach it a little bit differently, but they need alignment. You're right. They need alignment more than anything else. This job is going to probably have a coaching search that goes a variety of ways, but man, maybe one time it just doesn't. Maybe one time they just zero in on their candidate, and that's that. All right.
Really
By
quick
the
on
way,
John Summerall, what's crazy about him too is that obviously he played at Kentucky, who won this game, right? And so a lot of the thought was, well, if Summerall doesn't end up at LSU or Florida, who probably think at this point Florida State is a little bit better job than LSU, that's
yeah,
fine. But I think they're both kind of in that top tier as far as talent and resources, right? And that's things that you can't really move, despite how crazy a governor could be here or there, right? And so that being said, wait till we get Governor Tommy Tuberville. Anyway, and so that being said, right, Summerall, was seen as like, hey, he could just slide into Kentucky. So if you're Auburn, like I said, if that's a guy you're looking at, you need to go right now because his alma
yeah.
mater could be calling him in a month or two because they won this game.
John Summerall fish. Did he graduate from Kentucky?
Yeah.
Did he? Are we okay? So because he played at Kentucky, but I wasn't sure if he officially graduated.
Well,
If
he
we're
was
allowed
a
to say
GA,
that.
so he played 02, 03, 04, and then he was a GA 05,
Yeah, you're
06.
right.
So
You're
therefore,
right.
he graduated. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I always wonder about that with those guys of like, how exactly does that can I still say alma mater if I don't know if they graduated? Like, oh, he spent a certain amount of time there. Yeah, it is his alma mater. You are correct in that he had a career ending injury as well. Cause I remember like he wasn't like a 5-year guy there or something like that. But yeah, this is another opening. The overhit on 2.5 SEC head coaches getting fired, 4 SEC head coaches. Wow, we are in for a wacky coaching carousel. One last thing, and I know we got to run here. Playoff top 10, playoff poll on Monday. Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, A&M 3. I don't know why I'm holding up signs. Alabama 4, Georgia 5, Oregon 6, Ole Miss 7, BYU 8, Texas Tech 9, Notre Dame inexplicably at 10. And meanwhile, 1 loss Louisville, who won at Miami, will be behind 2 loss Notre Dame. Is that Good.
Sure.
We'll just end it on that.
Let's
end
do
on
it.
that.
Yeah.
All right.
And Kentucky, you know where you're at. You get a fun little win, but you know where you're at. So you probably need to get after John Steinmeier as well.
Yeah. That's a pod. That'll do it. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at South Down South, at Cesar Rivera, at Chris Orr. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.